The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer Podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer Podcast. I'm Matt Martelli. I'm here with the Off-Road Racer Podcast. We're in Ensenada, just north of Ensenada, and I'm here with the godfather of off-road racing, Sal Fish. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here, really.
Yeah, it's great to see you. You look great.
Thank you. Just drove in with Glenn Harris from California, from Malibu, and beautiful drive. The coast, as it always is here on the way to Ensenada, is fantastic, and it's nice to see you. We've talked on the phone a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, but I haven't seen you for a while, so It's nice to be here, and especially to be down here for the race. It's fantastic.
Well, we're in Papagayo, one of the hotels here. That's like one of the OG hotels. We were swapping stories a minute ago about, BFG pits here and all the racers being here, and it's still one of the old school spots. I really love that style of hotel here. I know they're turning in all the new baller hotels, but I love this old school stuff.
Well, no question, Matt. This is Baja right here, and just a story out of the past that a lot of people I don't think ever heard, but I think it was probably in the 80s, and this was kind of BFG's headquarters here because it was, just before Ensenada, about a mile and a half or so downtown Ensenada, and right on the beach, beautiful. You're looking right out at Todos Santos, which is, as you know, the big wave on the other side of that island. They catch the 50, 60-foot waves or whatever they are out there. And unfortunate situation for BFG. They were having a little meeting here, about 20 of them, and unfortunately, I hate to say it, but some banditos came in and actually held them up. No one was hurt, but robbed them. And this was, 40, 35, whatever it was, years ago. And that ended BFG's stay here. And it's nice to be here now because they've refurbished the cabanas here. Yeah. Place looks great, and I know that was a long time ago, and it could happen anywhere in the world, but it was a sad thing at that time.
Well, stuff happens. You just got to keep rolling with the punches, right?
That's for sure.
Otherwise, I don't know. To me, that's part of the allure of off-road racing is it's not, it's still the Wild West, and it's not totally safe. Is that, you being the godfather of this particular sport and culture, is that part of this?
Well, I think you know me well enough, and you've heard some of my rhetoric, and I've always felt that it's a sport, but it was not a sport. It was really an adventure. And as far as I was concerned, I wanted to keep it on the edge, and that doesn't mean unsafe. I just wanted to keep it an adventure type thing that, yes, everyone can do, but not everyone has the huevos to do it.
Exactly.
And, that's what I wanted to see happen. And I think that was Mickey Thompson's idea when he came to me back in 1972, 73 to start this thing. And I'm sure it was Ed Perlman who did it back in 1967. And I really wanted, as long as I was in charge, I wanted to keep it as an adventure and something that your grandfather did, you heard about it, you wanted to do it. It was a bucket list thing. You might do it and then say, hey, I've done it, I'm never doing it again, or you get hooked. And as you know, most people that come down here, they do get hooked. It's an incredible adventure. The nicest people in the world, beautiful landscaping, both the Sierra Cortez side, the Pacific side, the desert, the mountains, the pine forests. It's just overwhelming. The food, the liquor, the women, the people themselves. It's a beautiful country. And definitely. What a place to go racing.
We were out yesterday in Ojos, and I've never seen it that many flowers right now. Like it's like blankets of yellow, these yellow flowers going over everything, and you come out of the mountains and drop down, and out of the marine layer, the cold blanket, and then drop down into this just warm embrace of the interior of Baja. It was like, it's a dream.
Yeah. Well, most people think of the desert, and they think of the desert, but after a rain here, it just comes alive. I mean, it's just, as you mentioned, the yellows, the pinks, the oranges, all the colors out there, and just the greenery. It's spectacular. It really is.
I honestly, I don't think people have any idea, about the beauty of Baja in general. I mean, it's like one of those things. Like, I want to share it with people, but then I also don't want those people here. We were just downtown, and they were unloading tourists from the boats that come in here, and we're like, we came here to get away from you people, right? So it's that dichotomy. Well, tell me a little bit about that history of, like, it's 1970, 1971, and you were running Hot Rod magazine right at the time. And
yes.
That was back when print was king, and if you were running a magazine, I mean, you were like hanging out with senators and the mayor and movie stars, and then you meet Mickey, and somehow he talked you into going on this adventure.
Well, excuse me, I am going to take a little moment. My adventure actually started back in 1954. I was in high school, and I went to school in Los Angeles, a little high school. And my dad was a mechanic. He had an automotive repair shop in downtown Los Angeles, and he had about 6 mechanics working for him. He had a real nice business. And there was an ad in the LA Times, and I was always, even at that age, I was an adventurous type guy. In fact, in grammar school, I wrote a letter to National Geographic because I used to read that magazine. And I read about these adventurers that sailed on a boat, and they were doing a research thing. And I wrote them and said, I'm in grammar school, but when I get out, I'd like to get a job on a boat and do this adventure. And they wrote me back. I still have that letter. Wow. And said, well, we only take college graduates that are scientists or archaeologists or ocean people or whatever it is, and it kind of deflated my ego. But that adventure never left me, so to speak. So I saw this ad in the LA Times, and they were talking about a new home development project that overlooked the Pacific Ocean, and it was called Chapultepec. I haven't even had my mezcal yet, but anyway,
that's still a hard one to pronounce.
In Mexico City, there's a famous hill where the war happened, and they shot all the kids and stuff. Chapultepec Park, and this mountain right over here, they were going to build homes, and they were selling for like $8,000 or something.
But big money.
Back then. And I told my parents, I'm in high school. And I said, they just bought a brand new 54 Mercury when the Mercury style changed. 2 doors, really nice, black and maroon, black tuck and roll interior. And we said, why don't we take a weekend? Dad, you never take off. You're always working. Let's go down to Ensenada and look at these homes and see what they're doing. And my dad went for it. He says, okay. So we went through Tijuana, the old road, and I had a learner's permit, so I was 15 and a half. Yeah. And we got on this road here where it's, the constructions now that fell off into the ocean and everything. Right. And my dad let me drive the car. So in 1954, I actually drove into Ensenada. Nice. We drove over to that hill up there, which now has multi-million-dollar homes on it. That project never worked. My dad didn't want to buy a home in Mexico, but I got to drive the car. And I saw Ensenada, and that time, Ensenada was really a very sleepy fishing village. It wasn't what it is today.
Which is beautiful.
And here we are. That was 1954. How many years are we now? 2023. And when I started with Mickey, never dreamed, the wildest dream, that I would be in love and fall in and give my so to speak, my life and meet some of the nicest people in the world by being the president and owner of SCORE. So it really started back then.
Sure.
And then I got out of school, and then I went to work for Peterson Publishing Company and went from an ad salesman to the publisher of Hot Rod Magazine. And at that time, it was the #1 automotive magazine in the world. And you were right. We traveled first class. Peterson was a first class operation. I could go anywhere in the world because I think you'd write an article on.
I literally imagine it like a scene out of Mad Men, right? You know, where everybody's got like drinks in their hands, cigarettes, and there's.
It's crazy. Be at the London Chop House with Penske and John DeLorean and, the general manager of GM, and sitting there having drinks and talking about 5 years of what their cars are going to look like. And, I'd have my editor and a photographer with us, and it was crazy. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it was a first-class operation, and Peterson, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, Marge and Bob Peterson, took me in almost as their son. I was the youngest publisher that they had at that time. And I just clicked with them, and I clicked with the Detroit people and the European automotive manufacturers. I'd go back and see the new Mercedes being built, the Ferraris, Fiat. It was out of a movie, really.
Sure.
It was a dream, and I was able to live it. And I'd bump into Mickey because I'd go to all the races, the drag races, Bonneville, boat races, and everything, because that's what we did, covered it in the magazine. And we did stories on Mickey Thompson, and that's how I met Mickey. And then I was invited to run in the NORA event in the '69 NORA rally by Revell. They built a model car kit, and they built an actual Baja Bug. And they figured they'd get a lot of publicity if I got in it and drove it in the 1,000. So that's when I got introduced in 1969. After being here in '54, I actually entered the NORA race then.
So that, let me point that out. Like, that's what people are doing today with influencers, right? Like, it's still going, and that's still, people act like it's all a new thing. I'm like, look, this happened before. They just went right to the publisher instead, right?
It was the same deal. You're exactly right. And it worked great for me because I just, if you look around the old-time hotels, which the Papagayo, the Bahia, the San Nicolas, there weren't high-rise hotels. They were all on the ground. The Villa Marina wasn't there. But there was a clique of guys here that were the second generation of the families that started those.
Yeah.
And somehow I got in with that clique of guys.
Yeah.
And that's how I really fell in love with the people of Baja here. And they accepted me. Of Italian descent, which I should have been of Mexican descent, but they're pretty close, that Latin heart and soul that we have, I think. And that started my introduction to what the Baja and Baja California Sur was all about. And through them, I met tourists, like Nico Saad at that time was the tourist director here. I met mayors, governor, eventually President of Mexico invited us back to sign a contract when I did finally leave Hot Rod, and Mickey convinced me that I could be the president and this would be my deal someday. And Mickey was a very unique individual.
Sure.
And as you know, I moved out of his office shortly after joining SCORE, and thought I probably made the biggest mistake in the whole world, and I should have gone back to Peterson, but I hung it out and I wanted to do it, and I was able to buy Mickey out before the unfortunate situation that happened to he and Trudy. And almost 40 years later, it was time for me to pass it on. And as you know, Roger and Elise are doing an incredible job. And it's almost 11 years now since I sold SCORE.
Wow.
But my passion and my heart and my love is still here. I have a place in La Paz. I just got back. I'd been down there for a month, vacationing and enjoying the people of Baja Sur. And here I am at the 500. Roger and Elise were kind enough, and the people at SCORE, to make me the Grand Marshal for the entire year, because this year is the 50th anniversary of actually Mickey and I putting on the first Baja 500 here. and it's 50 years ago. And
That's so cool.
Just unbelievable. I mean, I'm just
Yeah, and it's not as. I mean, all of Baja's changed a lot, but not crazy. You know, like I started coming down here when I was 12, and like, yeah, I could see the growth change, but as soon as you step outside of the city, everything else is the same. You know, it's still just stunning. You know, beautiful as ever and wild as ever. No, that's really cool.
All right, Chase, number 23. It's 2023. This championship's yours. Let's show these guys what's up.
Easy, boys. It's not over yet. Big dog still gotta eat.
Whatever you say, big dog.
Seriously?
These fools think I'm fried?
They know the deal.
You and I were talking a while ago, and one of the things I was, learning about you is, and I was always curious, because you're not just passionate about off-road racing culture, you're passionate about Baja and the people of Mexico, and you've always had this very close relationship with them. Do you think that, one of the things you and I talked about before was, you had a trip when you were younger to Mexico City,
That's correct.
Do you think that had something to do with it?
Well, yeah, that was in grammar school. And we actually, I had a trip with a gentleman that his parents were from Mexico City, and they wanted him to come to the United States and learn English. And I went to a Catholic grammar school in Los Angeles, Transfiguration. And because I was Italian, they thought I spoke Italian, but my parents were born in the United States, and my grandmother lived with us, and she wanted us to speak Italian. My parents said, no, we want our kids to speak English because we want to assimilate into the country. So I don't speak Spanish, and I don't speak Italian.
Sure.
And as you could see from this podcast, sometimes I have a hard time speaking English, and it's not not because of the mezcal. But anyway, and Luis Cervantes was his name, and this young man, and just a nice guy. And so the nuns sat him next to me, thinking we could communicate. Well, he was speaking Spanish. I didn't know what I was speaking, and we became friends immediately. And he took a trip that summer in 7th grade, between 7th and 8th grade, with his uncle who he was living with, back to Mexico City. And we drove in I think it was a Buick Roadmaster, with the outside air conditioning. Yeah. And we drove from Los Angeles to Mexico City.
Wow.
And they lived in a place called, it's where the governor of Mexico, which was the French guy when France was, had still a big influence on Mexico, Maximilian.
Right.
And so they were very wealthy, and they lived in this gated, walled community in Mexico City. But his homes were built out of volcanic rock, and
they're just from the outside you're like, oh, it's just a big wall. Beautiful interior gardens and pools and all that.
And my parents were saying, "What are you going to Mexico?" But they wanted me to go to get the experience. But they figured there were a bunch of guys with the bandoleros and the hat, the big and sleeping under a cactus. Well, the architecture of Mexico City made California look like a pueblo. I mean, it was very modern, and they were creating wild homes, built on lava rock. And so I spent 3 months there and just had a great time. And so I met a different class of people. As we know, for a long time, I think Mexico itself, proper Mexico City, felt this peninsula was just a bunch of Indians down here, and they didn't understand, I don't think, who lived here in this Baja. You had the Spaniards that came, obviously. You had Italians, Germans, Russians, English, that all somehow gravitated to this peninsula and made their mark. And that's why you have great wineries here, flour mills here, the French in Santa Rosalia. There's an incredible culture here. And the Latin, obviously, influence. So it's a hodgepodge of people, but it's the heart of the Mexican people, the heart of the Latino people. And they are the most gracious. I mean, you could go out, as you've done, and as off-road racers have done, And as I've done, I've walked this peninsula, I've ridden a burro on it, I've flown over it, I've driven it, obviously, in trying to find new routes and meeting people and stuff. And you'll be in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and people have absolutely nothing, really, except their family and their love of the land, and they will give you something to eat before they'll eat it. And I think one of the things the off-road community has done as a whole, I believe, most of the people that come down here have given something back to the country. The ones that haven't, they don't belong here, and they usually don't last. But I think our people, the off-roaders, have donated, to the orphanages, have started mission relief funds, have just done so many things for Baja and Baja Sur. We got a lot back from them, but I think we still are giving a lot, and I think that's important.
I think that's an interesting point, because it's always an interesting evolution to watch people go through, because I remember it happening to me where, I felt, wow, like I recognized, at a point in my life, like how special it was to live here and to have Baja as our backyard, and to look at, some of the poverty and some of the challenges down here and be like, these are easy fixes. Like, we have the resources to help these people, and we owe it to them, because, we're allowed to come down here and use this beautiful land, to race and just go have these just beautiful experiences, and, as the world goes, maybe someday it's not here, but hopefully that's long after I'm gone, because I don't want to see that, and I really, being adjacent to San Diego, in California in general, it's a really cool and weird relationship, because the news and everybody demonizes different parts of Mexico, and there's a lot of strife with the cartels and all the different things in mainland Mexico predominantly. But man, once you cross that border, and it's like, holy shit, like you just look at it and you're like, why didn't they tell me about this? This part of it is what you're supposed. The 99.999% of what's great about especially Baja. And I don't think you understand that until you're here. And then when you experience it, and I think when you have a certain amount of time down here and you really get to go deep and have more and more experiences in the wild, and I think that taps into something in your DNA. And, I'm grateful. Like, I was born in Michigan. I was born in Kalamazoo. It's freeze to death there. So moving out here when I was 12 and coming right to Baja, and actually right to this hotel fishing with my uncle, was like, it's like hitting the lottery. And then it just kept getting better and better and better. So it's really cool.
So Mitch, why is this bike so drippy?
It's our 23 race bike. We can start up front, work our way to the back. Bones can tell you about the suspension.
The rear shock is one of the most critical parts of the bike.
Pegs with the titanium mounts.
Kashima coating here.
Anti-gravity lightweight battery.
Young's modulus.
Horse and a half.
Works chassis lab.
More tie than a space shuttle.
Really? I might need that repeated.
This thing slaps.
Slaps.
Oh, you should have told me that earlier.
Obviously you've had, ton of experiences, really leading off-road culture. Are there any moments that stick out that you're like, holy shit, like that was wild or really cool? There's probably a lot.
Well, Matt, I think, when you called me and asked if I was going to be here and the reason you wanted to do this podcast, I try to anticipate, what I might want to say or what you're going to ask me. And as I knew, you would be an excellent, quote, interviewer, which makes the podcast more interesting, not because of the individual, but by how you present it and everything. And I anticipate possibly that question, and it's almost impossible. First of all, it's going to sound almost corny, possibly, but I didn't have a job. I didn't see this as a job. I saw it as my life, It gave me an opportunity to meet people all around the world, because motorsports does that. I don't care. You know, I'm not a movie actor. I'm not a multimillionaire. I'm not a CEO of a tech company.
Right.
You know, I'm just a guy that puts my pants on one leg at a time, like most people.
Yep.
But I had the opportunity to do something that most people dream about during the week or the month or the year. I did it every day. It was hard work, but I never saw it as a job. I never saw it as a paycheck. I saw it as an experience, and a life-changing experience. I met some of the nicest people in the world that are still my friends today, that I could call on at any time, or they could call on me, and we would be right there to do whatever we could do to help, whatever the situation is. It gave me the opportunity to basically travel most of the world because of being in motorsports, and a unique motorsports.
Sure.
You know, when someone asks where I'm at a social event, someone asks, you know, you're standing there talking with guys and blah, 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 and this guy's an attorney, and this guy's a judge, and this guy's a brain surgeon. No, what do you do? And, you know, I said, well, I'm involved in motorsports. I don't say off-road right away. I say motorsports, and I'll guarantee you, within 5 minutes, I've captivated the audience. They don't care about the brain surgeon. They don't care about the drug.
Yeah.
My grandfather raced in Indianapolis, or my blah, blah, blah did this. And I said, oh, yeah, that's really nice. And I said, but have you ever heard of the Baja 1000? It might not be that they know score, but they know Baja, and they know the Baja 1000. They say, oh, yeah, you know, my brother-in-law went down there and his wife was raped or something. You know,
You're
you go,
right. Some crazy story.
Yeah, okay. Or, yeah, my so-and-so race, and it's something I've always wanted to do. It's just an incredible opportunity, and everyone just motorsports. And then, you know, they might say, yeah, you know, my uncle did it once, but I'll never do it. And the majority of them say, you know, I've always wanted to do that, or I've fished down there, or have you been to this hotel, or you've done this? And I've been around the world, basically. And I bumped into someone that has heard about this race, heard about the Baja Peninsula, and they, you know, heard about the food, the Wild West, as you mentioned earlier on. It's just incredible. So for me I could probably talk until the race is over at the end of this week and never touch on all the experiences and the people and the craziness. I mean, think about it. When you use the terminology, you know, it's like herding cats.
Yeah.
Well, here I am, just a regular guy, and I've got guys that could buy and sell me 1,000,000 times that own big companies that are racing, and I'm telling them the rules and regulations of what to do. Right. And I'm in a foreign country. I don't speak their language, and magically it happens. And it's not just because of Sal Fish. It was because of the people that came and supported Sal Fish in the off-road community. We had just my nephew, Paul, you know, Sue Johnson, Bill Savage, Charlie Engelbart, Charlie Lavelle, you know, Dominic Clark. I could go on and on with people, volunteer people that came down because they enjoyed Mexico and they enjoyed being a part of motorsports. Sure, you could buy a ticket and go to Indy or NASCAR, but you stand over here. But you could come to SCORE and volunteer and be out in the middle of the desert and watch some of the greatest action in the world.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to another podcast, and you know, the guy's a ex-Navy SEAL and really a psychologist, I'd call him now, because of the things he's been through in his life. And what he talked about was this idea that there's certain things that we do that are extremely difficult, and we have to do it because it unlocks some part of our DNA inside of us that we need to unlock to realize who we are and what we're capable of. And whether you're, a volunteer, or whether you're a paid person, or whether you're a racer, this does that. And you're going to go through some trials and tribulations, especially as a racer. As a racer, the psychological war you go through with yourself, slowly, ridding yourself of all these, predisposed fears that you have of dying, of, being stuck in the desert for a night, and all these things like you go through, and then it's funny because once you go through that process and unlock these things that are there inside of you, then you operate in the real world, and people come to you with problems, and you're like, listen, this is not a problem. Okay? You're not going to die.
Yeah.
You know, and I talk to these guys that work with me, you know, and I'm like, you know, spending 2 nights in the desert and getting to the point where I realize, like, I have water and, I have some chips, and I'm not dying, right? I'm going to have to walk out. I think I walked out 17 miles to Melling Ranch, but when I got there, I didn't have any money on me or anything, and they were like, "Oh, my friend, you know, you look hungry. Let's make you a steak and get you a shower." And and it was the best steak and the best shower I ever had in my life, right? And then when Chase Crew got there the next day, I'm like, "Hey, I kind of want to hang out here for a while," right? And so that's one of the things that I see it too with the volunteers that we work with. You know, it's like there's something inside of them that turns on. And they come to me and tell me things about, I don't know, timing and scoring. What if we did this? Like, oh, I didn't think about that. And I could see that with a lot of the people who helped build SCORE. Because to your point, it wasn't one person.
That's right.
And it goes, it's funny because there's, some Mexican guys that I became friends with that were flaggers, right, during your reign. And I met them, standing there with a camera, talked to them, exchanged stickers, maybe beers. And now we keep in touch, and it's like, that's the thing. They do their job all year. They do everything all year, and they're like, I'm going to be there for the 500. I'm going to be there for the 1,000, right at the goat trail waving that flag. Like, that's who they are. Yeah. And that's a really cool thing to see and to be able to give to people.
I agree. And that's one of the things that really kind of changed my life from the standpoint from flying first class, eating in the 21 Club or any fine restaurant and an expense account that was unlimited. It gave me a challenge to see what can I really do. And, sure. I think if you've ever been to one of my drivers' meetings, I've Definitely. Been, one of my quotes is, when someone starts raising their hand and says, well, how can I get through this route or this, or it's too tough, or how come you did this, or whatever it is. When I'd figure out a course, I usually had a 4-wheel drive vehicle, but I never put it in 4-wheel drive because most of our customers were only in 2-wheel drive, sure. And they were in a stock Volkswagen or a $1 million SCORE trophy truck. And I had to design a course that would hold up for all of those and be challenging. So I'd say, this sport is not for wussies. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you're saying, it's man against machinery and the element.
Sure.
And the element being Baja. And if you don't use some common sense and take yourself not to the limit, I'm not talking about, guys that hand glide or whatever they do off of mountain edges and, climb solid rock walls.
Sure.
But it's a challenge, and it brings out what you really have. You said DNA. It's not for everybody.
Right.
You're not making left-hand turns in a circle, and you get there at 9 in the morning and go home at 4.
Right.
This thing is, you're dedicated. You come out here, and you've got to figure out if you break, how you're going to fix it.
Yeah.
And it's changed. There's no question about it from when you go back 50 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
There were no maps.
Yeah.
There was no GPS, no helicopters, no gas stations, maybe 22 miles of pavement. The rest was all off-road.
Right.
No cell phones. And when you left your house, when I'd leave my wife, and I'd say, I'm going to go look for a route. She says, well, where are you going? I'd say, south. What happens if I don't hear from you? And I said, well, you won't hear from me until I get to a major place, which there was only maybe 3 places, and you picked up a phone that was on a wall and cranked it.
Right.
And it went over to the mainland, Hermosillo.
Yeah.
Then she piped it into someone in someplace in the U.S., and then hopefully my wife would pick up, and I would say, well, I broke, and I'm only in Colnet, which is only 100-something miles south of Ensenada, and I've already been gone a week.
Right.
So it's different, but it's still. I think Roger and Elise are doing a good job, and the people at SCORE, Juan Tintos and Jose G, are doing an incredible job in keeping it an adventure.
Absolutely.
They've they brought it up to the. Is this the 21st or 21st century?
Sure.
Yes,
One of those
one of those centuries. You know, I know I'm getting to be a century, whatever it
Right.
is, old, but you know, they're keeping that spirit, and I
Sure.
think that's what separates the Baja and off-roading in general, but especially the Baja Challenge. You
Yeah.
know, it's and I'm going to paraphrase it, but I wish I was the one that said that. But it was Rod Hall. You know, Rod said when God created the Baja Peninsula, he also created it for off-road racing because it is the ideal place. I've been to the East African Safari. I've been to Dakar. I've seen all those. They're all great places and everything, but they don't have what this peninsula
100%.
has. Both states, as you know, there's Baja and Baja Sur. The Sea of Cortez, as I mentioned, you know, the Pacific, all the stuff in between, the beauty of the missions, the restaurants, the food, everything is great. I mean, it's spectacular. I know I sound like the head of the Chamber of Commerce for Baja, but I am.
no,
I love it. You know,
but
it's not for everybody.
But if you think about too, like how this all started with with the Eakins brothers doing the Peninsula Run, like these guys had come back from war, right? And after you go through an experience like that, you're kind of, I wouldn't say you have screws loose, but you need some additional stimulation. Yeah. And so they came and did something that was seemingly impossible. And that ignited something that, now is all over the world. I mean, you and I went to Germany together to the Baja 300, right?
Armin.
Power Days with Armin Schwartz.
Yeah.
And, that was spectacular. Those people, I mean, we might have well landed from outer space, And
was that right there on the Czech border? It was crazy.
It was beautiful. But it also, like in traveling, and right before COVID, we were in China, and they wanted us to, put on a race there. And so we were starting to work on the route. And we're in Inner Mongolia in the dunes. And these guys roll up to us with these like hand-built cars that they had seen a picture on the internet, and they had, taken their bike fence and their Toyota engine that they had, and they had built these, half-assed off-road cars. But it was really cool to see that, on the complete opposite side, that our culture still has that effect, right? Yeah. And it just reminded me of, one, how powerful it is, and like, now too, like, I was just out at this Overland Expo, which I'd love to take you to, because this is, I can clearly see the connection from, the timeline from off-road racing, to this, right? And now this is a consumable version of off-road where it's like you get all the gadgets, and most of those people don't go very deep, but we had a good time, saw a lot of really cool stuff, but ultimately we had some drinks and started joking with everybody. And I said, well, okay, so explain to me, where's the point where we drive too fast and we're no longer an overlander and we're like pre-running? Because I'm pretty sure we were doing that since I was 12, right? And camping in the back of trucks and, wherever, right? So, but it's cool to see that effect. One of the things that, I saw there was, the Toyota guys walking around, and the new Toyota Tacoma came out, and it's linked in the back, production truck.
Unbelievable,
right?
Yeah.
And that's because of you. You know what I mean? Like that wouldn't be happening right now if you hadn't have championed this and created trophy trucks and done all this stuff. So for me personally, it's really cool to see that and talk to those engineers. And also remind them, like, this shit didn't fall out of the sky. Like, even we're out here with, Razors and even the UTV, that was an evolution of vehicles that came through really Lynn Chenoweth, and got, perfected. And then now they're being, mass produced, but it all comes back to this, which is really cool. Now to see that in the Bronco and the Jeep and
the Raptor.
Yeah, the Raptor for sure.
That's a good point. When you look at what was going on in the 70s and the 80s with the automotive industry and the truck, and Toyota was very smart.
Yep.
Being our official sponsor, that's when you couldn't give away a Japanese pickup truck. I mean, Nissan and Toyota came into the market, and they were, no one wanted to buy any of that stuff, and they became our official sponsor, And by me using that vehicle to go mark the course, and it held up, and it did what we wanted to do. And BF Goodrich giving us tires and making special tires to beat the Baja.
Yeah.
Those are two examples. And you mentioned almost every automotive manufacturer, Ford especially, and Toyota took advantage the right way. They came down here, and their engineers and testing would say, we learned more in running one Baja 1000 race than a year worth of testing at their testing ground with transmissions and things, weird stuff like before, remember the 8 tracks?
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever. Well, Pioneer came to me.
Yeah.
Pioneer Sound Systems, and they were developing an 8-track, and they said, we want to install this in your car because we understand it was a Toyota, my 4Runner.
Right.
Toyota gave me a 4Runner, and Cal Wells set it all up and everything, which was fantastic. So I could go look for the courses.
Right.
And BF Goodrich gave me the tires, Bill Stein gave me shocks. The manufacturers that saw there was something there that could eventually turn into a saleable item because if you could beat the Baja, and it could do that, well, you could take your kids to the soccer game or go recreate on the weekends and with the same vehicle that you're going to work with or whatever. And I'll never forget, they gave me this 8-track thing, and we're bouncing around here, and it didn't work. So online, we had all this crap, that tape or whatever it is, going through the cab of the car and everything. And I took it back and said, hey, and they were so happy to find out, well, they got to do something because of the bouncing and the thing. They projected, they had to do something with that, whatever you call that.
Yeah, that,
not a disc, it was that
cartridge.
Cartridge,
Right? Yeah.
cartridge, thank you, to make the tape in there stay if you start going over rough ground. So there were so many things
That's so funny.
that happened as a result of the off-road thing. I mean, people said, hey, there's a proving ground. Let's go test. If it won't hold up there, it's not going to hold up for the family that wants to take the vehicle out and do something. So these are, you trigger every time you say something new. I pick up on something that I even forgot about, things that happened as a result of being involved in this new up and coming, because there wasn't an off-road industry, let's face it. If it wasn't for Mickey putting on the off-road show at Anaheim, all of a sudden it gave people a place to come. That were just like in drag racing. There wasn't guys weren't building stuff in Detroit for drag racing, but the people that came back, from the war, they were building widgets in their garage. They had a real job, and they were trying to make cars go faster on the dry lake bed and on the drag race. And the same thing happened with off-road. And we really were the nucleus at the beginning, we being SCORE, that stirred this thing to all of a sudden, well, let's make a better shock.
Yeah.
Let's make an air cleaner that could go through Chapala silt beds.
Yep.
Let's make a helmet that works because these guys are going to crash. Let's do things. Bill Savage, our tech director, who probably was one of the most hated guys in the sport. Because,
he still is. He still takes that on, right?
And probably one of the most responsible guys for saving people's life, because he realized we were going to crash, and we had to build chassis and frames and safety equipment that when you crashed, you were crashing somewhere out in the middle of the desert. You didn't pick up the phone and call the auto club, and someone came out. You had to figure out how are you going to survive. And so we built cars that, chassis and things that were really Baja proven, and it worked, but it wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. But again, as I said, I think I was very blessed. I was not an outdoors guy. I didn't even know I wasn't a Boy Scout. So Mickey and I learned the hard way. I went out there, slept on the ground, I didn't know what a snake was. I found out, slept in the back of my pickup truck, slept in the front seat of the 4Runner, didn't eat, never would take food with me, didn't realize how you survive, but I survived.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Baja builds in people. And I've watched families coming down here that they were having a little, let's say, not seeing things eye to eye.
Sure.
Husbands and wives, kids and fathers and mothers, and all of a sudden, because came together to build a vehicle that was affordable and something that they could do. They didn't have to spend $1 million or start when they were 2 years old to become a Formula One driver or an Indy or a NASCAR guy. And they said, we could go to the Baja. And all of a sudden, the family came together. And, we call it a family sport. And it truly is when you look at the generations.
The family aspect of this is incredible. I mean, we're sitting just in here in this, in this compound, and Jesse Jones is here with AJ Jones, Seth Quintero with his dad, Aaron Quintero, and they're like, Seth went out and pre-ran with his dad yesterday. Jesse went out and pre-ran with his dad, and I saw them come in. I go, how'd your day go? And they look at me and they're like, well, we're here. I'm like, what happened? Well, we rolled the car. We caught on fire. We were waiting for 6 hours. Bryce Menzies came in and towed us out. And I'm like, sounds like an adventure. And they're like, yep. And they're going back out together tomorrow, right? Yeah. So I think the family aspect is something, particularly in off-road racing, that people don't give enough merit to. Like I saw it firsthand with Andy and Scott McMillan. It was watching Andy, go through his teenage years and into his early 20s. I mean, I wasn't hanging out with my dad back when I was that age. I mean, we have a great relationship, but we weren't hanging out.
Yeah.
And Andy and Scott were like besties, man. They were talking about off-road racing strategy, and it was just one of those things just really cool to observe,
Certainly.
And then Mark and Luke and all these families, the Herps, obviously, 3 generations in, and now, their kids are, dude, I was over there last night, and their kids they're really into it. Yeah. Thor and EJ and all of them, and it's cool to see, It
is. And you look at the Wilsons and the Ampudias, and the Vildosolas and the Lawrences, and, you could go on with the families that have come together. And don't misunderstand. I'm not saying they were not together.
No, but this
is a way of life, and it's helped them business wise because they become mature in their own business way with their parents. But they know, as you mentioned early on in this thing, there's a DNA, and it never comes out because you never have the opportunity because everything's going so well all the time.
Sure.
But when you're out here trying to figure out to get to point A to point B, and you're not on a paved road.
No, and you're breaking stuff.
And you're breaking stuff, and you've got to get back to someplace else to get things fixed. Well, you all of a sudden come together and figure it out. And I think, to me, that family, it really has brought a lot of people together, and I think it's a great deal. I look at, as I said, I've had the pleasure in the early years because of, the families that were involved, naming the McMillans and the Herbses and that type of, and the Vildosola family very early on, very helpful in Mexico for me. And you look at them now, and their grandsons are doing just what they were doing, and that's, you don't see that in a lot of things at all.
It shows how special this is, but it also shows too the opposite, which is like you figure out really quick who your friends and family are and who you can rely on when you're an off-road racer. Because you're like the requirement is, you're gonna have to drive a lot of miles. You need to figure out some mechanical skills. A lot of the people are using their own vehicles, so it's an insane ask when you think about it. But then on the converse side, it's like, what are you going to do? You sit at home, you're going to play video games. That's not living. This is living. When you can be a part of a team that, and you don't even have to win, but you're just a part of a team who goes through this incredible experience, and you can go back and wear those team colors. I mean, that means something. It's not like watching football. Like, you're not on the football team. You're just a fan. Mm-hmm. But when you come and you pit and you chase for an off-road team, you're part of that team's success and or failure, and you feel it. Mm-hmm. One of the many things that I saw the McMillans do that was very wise is how they run their pit program and the volunteers that they get. And there are 2 guys in particular that I remember. One was a lawyer, one was a doctor, and they're always like, hey, send us the worst place to the summit, to the nastiest thing. I just got this new Jeep, and it's got a winch, and we want to use it, and we'll camp for 3 days. And it's like they spent $80,000 on a vehicle, and then they spend all year waiting for this one event to come and happen. It shows you the power of that.
It is. It's again, it's not just about racing. I think it's you're strategizing. You're trying to figure out. In other words, first of all, you're crossing into a foreign country.
Sure.
That alone, most people can't figure out how to do. Except going to an airport and having everything stamped and you go. But here you're going through an international border, one of the busiest in the world.
Yeah.
And you got to be sharp to figure out how to get through there without having any difficulty and not causing any problems. And I think one of the things we were talking earlier about, some confusion about what happens in a foreign country and everything. But, I learned very early on, in my travels, if you're a good person where you come from and you're a good person into another country, a foreign country, you normally won't have a problem.
Right.
But when you're a dickweed where you live and you go into another country and become a dickweed, you're going to go to jail and you might not get out. And you're the ones that's screaming and yelling how you got screwed. But when you find out what that guy did or girl did, and you go, you know what, hey, if you did that where you lived, you'd be in the
you'd be in prison for life.
And so it's about an individual, you know what I mean? And I think off-roading brings out the best of our people, and the ones that try to do it and they don't make it. And when I say make it, I don't mean the guy that stands on the podium, because everyone that enters an event down in Baja, as far as I'm concerned, is a winner.
Right.
They're doing something unusual. They're doing something different, and for them, it's getting to the finish line, whether they're first place or 9th place or 10th place, or they don't even finish, but they get to the finish line.
Yeah.
And as you never give up. As I think that was one of Corky Millen's lines. You never give up, and that's the truth.
That is the tenement of our culture. As Corky said, he's never ever give up. And then Rod's was like, you must finish first, finish first, right?
That's right. Great lines.
It's absolutely,
and it's truth.
Yeah,
it's the truth in anything. If you took that philosophy, which Rod did in his business, and certainly Corky did in building his empire. That's the motto. What they did, and that builds character, and that was, I think, at night for me. It was tough. I mean, and especially having an accident and someone losing their life. I mean, that's not an easy thing to live with. But when you sort through that and you look at the individuals doing what they wanted to do, and you could step out of your house and get run over by a bus.
Just to be clear, if I die in a trophy truck, I'm perfectly cool with that. In fact, you don't need to do anything. Maybe light it on fire at that point and sing Kumbaya.
It's your trophy truck, right?
Yeah. Hopefully, but I agree. I think that. This, it's that saying of like iron sharpens iron, right? And this culture makes people better.
Yeah.
It really does. I see it, I see it with all these guys, I see it with myself. I see it with the guys who work with me. You go through this stuff and you're like, man, what am I doing? And then you get to the end of it and you're like, okay, when can we do that again? It's almost a craziness, but no, it's really cool. Were there, throughout your years of racing, were there any racers that stood out to you that you're like, man, this guy is just talented, he's going to be a star, and so on?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I'd have to say there was no school like there to go to Off-Road 101 to
Right.
become an off-road racer, just like there was no school to become a, quote, off-road promoter, I mean, how do you, it was just, there was nothing, you made it up as you went along,
Sure.
okay? Well, I think there's no question when you look at other forms of motorsports, they started young because the sports were around. They've been around before, drag racers and things of that nature, and Indy and sports car racing and Le Mans, Formula One racing and stuff. Where off-road, it was get a Volkswagen, take the body off,
Figure it out.
take it to Pismo Beach or to the dry lake bed and jump over dune hills and think you're really having a great time. And then the 60 came, and all of a sudden we've got a legitimate race going on in a sport. And so people just developed into it. But I think there were some people that if you put them in anything on, think about our DNA as Americans and human beings. A lot of us were conceived in the backseat of an automobile,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
4 wheels,
Yeah.
okay? Think about it. A lady becomes pregnant. She gets in a car, drives to a hospital,
Right.
puts on a gurney, put in a gurney or on a gurney, pushed into the operating room or however you have a baby, have a baby comes out, they put it on something with 4 wheels or 8 wheels, push it into the incubator or whatever the kid grow. I don't have kids, but I know how they happen, I think. So anyway, and they're all, and then the next toy they get is something with wheels and push. So we're a motion group of people, human beings. The caveman, caveman invented the wheel, right? And started rolling a wheel around, thinking it was hot stuff. So it's in us. It is in us, in us, and it takes all different forms. Off-roading, I think, is that raw, really back to the knuckle dragon kind of guys that are going to conquer something.
Yeah.
In a really original fashion, in a antiquated way, as opposed to a sophisticated chassis going around making left-hand turns. Okay, this was caveman style. You're going to go out there with your vehicle, and if it breaks, you're going to fix it. If you have to pull it, if you have to push it, if you have to hook up to a donkey and have them pull it for you, you're going to get to the finish line. And that's what excites me and excited me about what I was going to do and what I wanted to continue to do.
Right.
And I feel, even though it has changed, because the world has changed, everything has changed, I still feel the spirit of these young people that are out there going to enter the Score Baja 500 this weekend. That challenge is still there. Yes, they're sitting in maybe an air conditioned instead of a pickup truck. Now it's a $2 million, 1,000 horsepower, breathing, unbelievable.
But it's
piece
still
of
totally wild.
Totally wild, without a doubt. There's nothing like it.
It's totally wild. And one of the things I love about the promoter side of it is people come to me and they're like, "Hey, who do you think is going to win?" And I'm like, "Well, there's a logic to it." And then we throw that logic out the window because, like this race, it's like, okay, Luke's starting out front. He's in a 4-wheel drive Mason. He's good. He's one of the best right now.
Without a doubt.
The platform is pretty figured out, but there is no bulletproof platform and there is no guarantee, right? Like, people understand, like, you can do everything right and a $2 part fails or a rock flies into something and, it just ends your day and you're sitting there going, like, how do we, there's improvements that you can always make, but then there's the chaos theory, the bottlenecks, the booby traps, the ruts, the rocks that moved on course, like all this stuff, right? And I think, I I don't anticipate that ever going away.
Yeah,
You know?
I think, you hit on, and, I waltzed around your question about who I thought was
Drivers,
the,
yeah.
but on what you're talking about here, I think is really important. I normally, I lost interest in Indy a long time ago.
Sure.
And I did this last Sunday. I
Yeah.
did watch, and I thought I saw some of the finest racing I've ever seen
Yeah.
in Indianapolis. Those guys out there were absolutely incredible. But you just hit on something. They get in a line, and they know they could almost touch that wall in the turn, and they know when they could come, how far they could come down, and then there's the marble effect because of the tire stuff and everything. But it's basically, until, and they're right there on top of a guy, it's basically either a driver error or they lost the air from the car in front of them or whatever that causes a problem. Out there, pounding out there in that desert, I don't care, Luke, whoever it might be, they could pre-run that course 24 hours a day, a month ahead of time, and the day of the race, a cow could walk in front of them, a donkey, a car coming backwards on the course, a thunderstorm in the mountain, 50 miles away, and all of a sudden you're sitting in a wash, and you're almost getting. It's totally. I don't care how good you are, how great your equipment is, how many chase guys. There's no guarantee that you're going to get to that finish line because you've got to have some common sense and you have to know when to go 5 miles an hour and when to go 140 miles an hour. 100%. And the difference in a lot of people, they put the helmet on and their brain and their right foot turns to mush. And they forget that.
Oh, definitely.
And you can't do that in off-roading. You can't do it in any motorsports, but it's really critical because there's no white line. There's no guardrail. There's nothing out there but you and the Baja Desert. And you got to know how to drive it and know what to do. And that's where these guys, young kids, get mature real quick.
Sure.
But I'm going to go back to your question. I would say, without a doubt, Malcolm Smith is probably one of the finest off-road or general racer I've ever met in my life. Absolutely fantastic. You could put him in anything, and I think he's going to drive it. And I have all the respect for all the families and every racer out there, but I would say that Malcolm is a gentleman. I've always enjoyed his company when I've seen him. He's done so much for the sport.
Sure.
He's done an incredible job with his family. His son is an incredible racer himself and a businessman. Fantastic. And then you take Robbie Gordon. I mean, look at that guy. I mean, I think he's the kind of guy that when, I've seen videos of him as a young kid and his dad, because his dad was a great racer. But I think Robbie, you could put him in anything and he's going to drive the wheels off it. He's going to get the most you can and he's going to probably drive it harder than it should. And sometimes he's going to make it and most of the times he doesn't because he pushes it way past the limit. And those two guys, totally opposite type of personalities and individuals, but they are fantastic. And it was a difficult situation, as you know, Matt, and I hate to be called a promoter because I was not a promoter. I don't think I was just happened to do what I was doing. But when I shook your hand or any racer's hand at the start of the finish line, when you put that helmet on, you were my customer. And I treated all of them, as you know, the trophy truck guy to the Class 11, which is stock VW. They were equally as important to me because if I had a restaurant, they came in and they wanted a peanut butter jelly sandwich. I served it to them. They paid me, and I gave them the best one they could have. And that's how I felt of my customers there. They were all equal. The motorcycle people, the four-wheel people, they were all out there keeping my business alive. So, I think they're all great racers, and I picked out Malcolm because he came to my head, and I hadn't mentioned his name in any of this, and a lot of people probably are going to not remember the name Malcolm because they're too young now, and he's an incredible individual. Incredible. And Robbie Gordon, as young as he is, he's a young man now, still is rather. And I think he's done an incredible job.
Yeah,
When you think of running NASCAR, Indy, go-karts, I think at one time, and off-roading, incredible talent.
Yeah, it was cool to see, him bridge, the different disciplines because, when I was growing up and watching the guys like Parnelli go from, IndyCar to winning an off-road race, whether it was the Mint 400 or Baja.
Or the Baja.
It was like, it was really cool, I wanted to be like them. And then same, it was really funny is like, in the 80s and the early 90s, I mean, the bike guys were the guys.
Huh.
You know what I mean? And so that's one thing that bothers me now is that, they don't get the attention I think that they deserve. But like, and now, like, because the bikes are so capable, the speeds that they're going and the performances that they're giving that nobody sees, it's like I've been fortunate that because I film a lot of the races, or I have in the past, I've seen these, incredible things from a helicopter. And I'm like, holy shit, are you watching? Get the camera. We're not even here to film this guy, but we got to capture this, It just incredible, performances. And this race is going to be, there's 4 or 5 guys, racing this race that could win it. New guy that just won San Felipe. Carrion, and he's charged up, and he gave Husqvarna its first win in like 30 years or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And he's some kid who grew up on a moto track and started coming and doing this and like, hey, this is really cool. And then he beats all the factories at San Felipe, and everybody's like, who is this kid,
Yeah, no, you're right. And the motorcycle, when you look at, today, look at Larry Rossler, I mean, incredible. There's a guy that could ride anything. And you look at Johnny Campbell.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Just kids and everything. And Harden, I mean, these guys are super guys. And as you said, it's very difficult because because of a full-bodied, and the manufacturers, they get the exposure, the four-wheel vehicles. But when you think of what a motorcycle guy does out there, unless you've been out there and really walked and seen the terrain,
it's
that guy is his
no,
butt,
it's gnarly
like this, and his legs, and it's incredible.
And
really.
the consequences are huge.
When they come off a bike, it's compared to being in a buggy or it's amazing. But that makes up this whole society. And I wish I could name every racer and give them a little shot. It can't, and I apologize for them because I love them all, and they made my life, a unique experience, and I couldn't have, in the wildest dream could I have ever had an opportunity to do what I've done and still doing, thanks to SCORE and Roger and Elise inviting me back. To spend time.
And I love that. I think it's very important. It's like one of the things where, like, as a child, like one of the biggest influences on my life besides my dad was my grandfather, right? And so the idea that like you park people past a certain age off to the side and they're like not a part of the culture, I'm like, this is dumb. I'm like, these guys can tell us a lot of stuff, as well as tell us where all the good stuff's at, right? where to drink, where to eat, right? And so it's like that was one of the things I really relished was having the time that I had with Rod Hall when he was around, having the time with all of the the OGs of off-road racing. I think that's really important to have that as part of our culture, is to keep those people involved. I mean, even Johnny Johnson and some of those other guys, like, with the Mint and stuff we're doing, we're like, hey, will you come to dinner? And they're like, why do you want me there? And I'm like, because you won this race 4 times. You're badass. And you're part of our culture. I don't want it to be just, who's this guy? There's a name, on a list somewhere. Because, again, it's just part of having a rich culture, and also hearing about the trials and tribulations that those guys went through. I mean, when you talk about Malcolm and having the career that he did and doing what he did and equipment that was like, vintage equipment, obviously now, and what we like, we're out, we just start in a Razor and it's perfectly set up with 18 inches of travel you know what I mean? And we had to, before that, we had to figure it all out. I mean, trying to build a car that didn't kill you was like an art, you know what I mean? And in fact, it was funny because, John Marking, obviously another person who had a big influence on me and this culture, he told me the whole story of like racing the Mint basically in a 16 car and peeing blood for 3 days and then going to his friend that made motorcycle shocks and going, hey, I got to figure this out because this is fun, but like that was brutal. and that, he was one of the people who really evolved suspension technology into, what it is today. And not just did that, but one of the things that, I'm really impressed by John is that he built a group of men to continue that mission. Yeah. Right? When you go into Fox today and you see Bobby and you see Brian Harold and you see some of the other guys, it's like, they're not as harsh as John was, but you can hear John talking in them and see John, right? And it's like, okay, this is going to keep going, into electronic suspension and, laser, tech. It's going to keep going,
it is.
So it's really cool to see.
Racing against your dad is something that 90% of the racers in the world will never get.
I've accomplished everything I wanted to do, and now he's just like taking the reins. I want to be remembered for being a huge part of short course, not just racing, keeping it alive, helping it grow. If it comes down to the last weekend and I'm in it, the boys better watch out.
What, out of all of this, I mean, what are you looking forward to the most? Now that you don't have to herd the cats, you can just kind of like watch the cats, right?
Well, I'm really looking forward to the 50th anniversary of the Score Baja 1000. I'm fortunate enough that, as I said, I have a place in La Paz, and Roger and his team decided to start the race, which is the first time that's ever happened in La Paz, and ended in Ensenada. And don't think that over the years that idea hadn't come to my head. It had, and a lot of people thought it should be done. But at the time, I did not think of doing it that way.
Sure.
And I really admire Roger and his team for coming up with the idea. I think it'll be a great success. So I'm looking forward to being there at the start line. But I guess, you don't, there's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't either fall asleep or wake up thinking about Score and all the great people that I've met and the great times that I've had. And also the difficult times. Thank God I have an incredible wife that put up with really a lot of nonsense on my part. I mean, no question about it. It was not a normal husband-wife relationship because of me being gone all the time. I mean, really, I was 7 days a week. My phone, it still is listed in a phone book, which I don't think your audience knows what a phone book is, but it's not something you sit on. It was something we used, and my number is listed, and it was listed because I figured if someone was down in Baja or in the desert and they needed help and they called, it's my responsibility to do something about it.
Right.
And I still feel that way. I get phone calls from people still today saying, aren't you the guy that did this? Well, I'm going down there. Is it safe to go down there? And I give them my 2 cents of why I think it is and find out what they're about before I really tell them yes, because sometimes you could hear something, and I say, maybe you should go to Hawaii. Get on the plane and
Right.
go sit there, and you don't have to worry about a thing or anything. But if you want an adventure, yes, So I'm enjoying the opportunity to have the time. Barbara and I will be married 50 years.
Wow, congratulations.
This September, which kind of is interesting, because I left Peterson
Right.
just after I got married. So that's how that 50-year thing with the Baja creation of Baja score racing. And I guess I'm still as excited. I mean, I was at San Felipe, and standing there at the start line, it was like when I was standing at the start line in the 60s at Fontana Raceway or at Pomona and watching a blown fuel dragster standing there and smelling the nitro and the tires burning and the asphalt rumbling. My God, I'd get goosebumps. And I was standing next to Roger and Elise at the start line, and the trophy truck fired up, and I'd look down and I had goosebumps all on my arms. So It was just so exciting. So I'm not score, but I still feel my heart and soul is here.
Sure.
And I think I will never give that up, no
Yeah.
matter what happens to me. It's always in my DNA now.
Sure.
And so I'm honored. I'm excited that I'll be able to be here in November. After that, maybe the phones won't ring and people won't want to invite me to, I've done, whatever value I could be to someone else. But, I'm enjoying my time at home with my wife. We still live in the same house we lived in 50 years ago in Malibu. And as I said, I have a lovely place down in La Paz, and I love going down there. The people are so nice. And, I could go, to be honest with you, anywhere in the peninsula, and I get a warm welcome for the rancher or a restaurant or a motel owner. It's really great.
It's fun. One thing, it's like, the people of Baja, they remember, right? and like we were talking about this as it relates to the Herps Truggy, right? They're always like, "Where's El Tiburon?" Right? So like you're definitely, if not the one of the most loved, characters in our culture, and by the racers, by the fans, definitely by the people of Baja. So that's something you should be proud of, because that means that, you operated correctly,
Well, I had good parents, and I think they gave me a good basic how to do things.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time. I'm looking forward to hanging out and drinking some mezcal and some wine, hopefully. And
Great.
And not, same thing. I love coming down here, especially because this isn't my rodeo, so I'm a little bit more relaxed than I am at my races. And
Isn't that the truth?
we're driving around eating at all the good restaurants and pre-running and having a good time. So look forward to more with you, Sal. Thank you for doing
Matt,
this.
thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to your people, who I think are my people also.
They are definitely your people.
My people
first.
are talking to your people,
exactly.
right?
They're your people. Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyway, they're people.
Yeah.
And I think, again, thank you for this opportunity, and I appreciate it. And the best of luck to you and your endeavors. I know you're making a big mark in our sport, and it's welcome, and I wish you the best.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.